Topic for today is the Armenian Genocide and the Ottoman Empire. So if you're looking at the site, I just want to refer you to the section here. I'll be looking at this particular PowerPoint. This is a excerpt from the Bryce Toynbee report, which is a British report about what happened to the Armenians during World War I. So let's begin this here. So what we call the Middle East today, even though some people say that is an offensive term to use, I understand that particular point. What we in the United States call the Middle East today, at some point was called the Ottoman Empire. Here you can see some of the Ottoman Empire here, Middle East, North Africa, and so on. So here you have the sides fighting World War I. One thing you need to know about the Ottoman Empire, it is definitely a diverse empire. You could have Jewish people living there, Christians living there, Armenians are living there, Arabs are living there, Muslims are living there. They're an imperial empire. When you are an imperial empire, you come into contact with different people. And that is what this is trying to show you. All of the acquisitions which combine create this Ottoman Empire thing. So eventually, in the early 1900s, you start to see a revolution that takes place, the Young Turks Revolution. The Young Turks wanted to Turkify the nation. Yeah, that is actually a term, Turkify. They wanted to make everybody in the Ottoman Empire Turkish. Why? Because they felt that there were too many people of different backgrounds and different ethnicities and religions, so they wanted to make everybody under the same umbrella. So the three Turks here, Enver, Talat, and Jamal, they create this new government, the Young Turks. And eventually what starts to take place is that during World War I, the Armenians are accused of siding with Russia. So the Armenians during the 1800s, they were blamed for numerous things. The Christian Armenians were not allowed to serve in the army because you needed to convert to Islam in order to be a member of the military. And as a result of that and a couple of series of wars that the Ottoman Empire had lost, there seemed to be some issues. Eventually, some of the Armenian people decided that they were going to come together and try to fight against the Ottoman Empire. So only point here is that in the 1800s, the Armenians had a lot of tension. This piece right here is looking at what the Turkish government may or may not have done to the Armenians. If you're looking for something that is specific about like an order, here they're trying to say that they're sending them into provinces. So this is like, an order, the 10 Commandments. They're collecting the arms. What does that mean? They're collecting the weapons of the Armenian people. And of course, this is happening during World War I. So what we're looking at here is a primary source document that they're going to excite Muslims' opinion by suitable and special means, that they're going to exterminate all males under 50. They're going to leave girls and children to be Islamicized. They're going to try to make everybody, a Muslim at this particular point. Killing off an appropriate manner of all Armenians in the army. So if you're looking for any sort of document that says that the Turkish government intentionally went after, you would have to look at the 10 Commandments. That right there is enough evidence to suggest that this was clearly a genocide. If you have no idea about what's going on, well, in the Armenian genocide, all of the able-bodied men are going to be killed. What's left over is going to be a vulnerable population that is going to be marched in the desert from point A to point B. Here you see some images of the marches. And in this particular document, it's just looking at some of the events that occurred. People are going to be marching in the nude. People are going to be attacked by the Kurdish population. There's going to be little water, little food, provided for these individuals. And if you read here, they're talking about the conditions as well as the amount of people that are dying along this particular march. Eventually, the United States Ambassador Henry Morgenthau is going to send a series of cables to Washington outlining what he is witnessing, these marches and some of the conditions. Notice here how he writes that there is a campaign of race extermination under a pretext of reprisal against rebellion. That's key right there, because remember he said before that the Young Turks were claiming that the Armenian population was siding with Russia. So that's why they collected the arms, and that's why they wound up doing what they eventually do to these individuals. And so that's what Henry Morgenthau here is writing to the United States leadership in Washington. Keep in mind that the United States is not involved in World War I. We are remaining neutral at this point. And Henry Morgenthau is simply just trying to say, hey, this is what's going on. He's physically in the Ottoman Empire, and he's trying to claim, that this stuff is happening, and, I'm the ambassador. Maybe we should or should not do anything. Notice how he says here, I believe nothing short of actual force, which obviously the U.S. are not in a position to exert, would adequately meet this situation. That's often an issue that comes up in genocide. Do you get involved? How do you get involved? Do you have to use force or no force? Now, Morgenthau, in comparison to the German ambassador, um, Baron von Wangenheim, now this is a quote from him. Um, Here he's saying that the Turks have the objective of consolidating the internal security of Turkey. So remember, the Turks are trying to say that the Armenians are enemies. And so here, remember, Germany's allied with the Ottoman Empire. He's saying, well, this is for the consolidation of the internal security of Turkey. So I would say he's supportive of what the Young Turks are doing. Did the Turks commit genocide? I'll leave that up to you to figure out. You can use this A, B, C, D, E criteria. Did they kill members of the group? Did they cause bodily or mental harm? Feel free to go back to this particular document and try to figure out what exactly were they guilty of. And so you can apply that definition to the definition of terrorism to the event. Looking at this particular map, you see the marches. They're moving from point A to point B. And in some cases, they're just moving them into the desert. If we're looking at here, they're just kind of moving them into Iraq. They're moving them into the desert. And the question here is, if a nation is moving a segment of its population and not really providing adequate resources, especially considering the weather conditions, if they die, is that country responsible? I guess you could use the argument, theory of evolution. If they couldn't make it, they couldn't make it. That might work. I don't necessarily, know how. I guess it goes back to the question: what's the point of government? The British, as I said before, the Ottoman Empire has a series of different groups that live there, and the British are really going to try to tap into this. They're going to send T.E. Lawrence into the Ottoman Empire to form an alliance with the Sharif Hussein. And the Sharif Hussein, here's an image of Sharif Hussein. He is an Arab living in the Ottoman Empire. Here's the British representative, T.E. Lawrence. This guy is going to try to make a deal with the Arab population in what becomes known as the Hussein-Mcmahon letters. And the Hussein-Mcmahon letter here, Mcmahon letter, the Great Britain is prepared to recognize and support the independence of the Arabs in all regions within the limits demanded by the Sharif of Mecca. So what they're saying here is that Britain is going to help create an Arab state that on land that is determined by the Sharif of Mecca. And that's what's significant here. So this is a promise to the Arabs that the Arabs will get land. The problem is there's another document called the Balfour Declaration. And in this one, the British are promising a series of land in Palestine to create a home for the Jewish people. So it's questionable to determine whether or not Sharif Hussein is under the assumption that he is going to get some of that territory as outlined here. It's not specific. And here they're simply saying we're going to grant this territory to the Jewish people trying to create a home for the Jewish Zionist movement, which is what this term is a reference to here. To further complicate things, there is a Sykes-Picot agreement between Britain and France where they're going to also have some sort of land agreement. In this image here, Sharif Hussein, he's thinking he's going to have some territory here to create an Arab state. The Jewish people think they're getting a section here as well, and the French are probably somewhere in this particular region. At the end, in this image, you see the Treaty of Versailles and mandates in Africa where the former Ottoman Empire, remember, they lose, and some of the territories. So if we could see under Iraq, it's blurry, proposed British mandate. Transjordan proposed British mandate. Syria is a proposed French mandate. So to think about this here, you have the Ottoman Empire that lost World War I. You have the Arabs being promised land here. You have the Jewish Zionist movement being promised land somewhere in this region, and the French are promised land here. And at the end, the British wind up with a significant chunk of what we call the Middle East here. This, of course, is going to have some consequences. This is a document a month after 9/11, and it references Osama bin Laden and some of the things that he said, referencing World War I, where he says that the sword fell upon America 80 years ago, and that is an indirect reference to World War I. For further information, check out the inspiring revolt clip on the site.